everyone. This is Satoru Iwata from Ten.
No No Girl is one of the 120,000 individual stories that needed to be written, told, and given a voice to fully begin to understand the collective stories of all those that were forced into American concentration camps during World War II. The trauma will never be fully understood by the public. It begins by giving voice and placing a spotlight on this unthinkable and horrific treatment of our Japanese American citizens and their Japanese alien parents and grandparents, telling their stories and their impact on families and loved ones for generations to come begin this healing process. Hello, my name is Vicky Takeda, committee member with the Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival. I'm here to welcome you today to CAT's panel spotlighting filmmaker Paul Goodman and his film No No Girl, along with actor Chris Tashima and actress Mile Jo. SVAPFS is screening No No Girl virtually at our film festival, which begins Friday, October 28th. I would now like to introduce our moderators for tonight's event, Leanne Lam and Caroline Moore of Contemporary Asian Theater Scene. Leanne?
Thank you so much, Vicki, and welcome to the program. We're very excited to bring our friend Paul Goodman back to this wonderful conversation because we talked with him at when he had the film Evergreen, and that was a delight. It was a family brought together by a fabulous story. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Paul Goodman, the filmmaker for No No Girl, Mika Jo, who plays Sue, and Chris Tashima, who plays Uncle Bob. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks so much for coming on board. We have a great conversation lined up for you today, so let's get started. You know, the use of rituals is used throughout the film. You know, the opening night begins with what appears to be a family ritual. Chris, your character, Uncle Bob, addresses the family with Okay, so every new year we say our favorite memory of the year. This year, a memory about grandma. We're wondering for each of you, do family rituals play an important part in each of your families? You know, what are they? And just does food play an important part in these rituals? And how do they really keep the generational legacies alive from one generation to the next through storytelling? Can you tell us a little bit about that and your experience? How about Paul, can you start?
Sure. Of course, of course. Lots of rituals. You know, I think there's a lot of rituals that I don't even know about. You know, it could be a situation where, oh, we have to go do this today, and I'll learn for the first time that, oh, we've been going to do tea ceremony for generations, and you know, I'm just figuring it out now. You know, a lot of rituals are kind of brought into my life for the first time, you know, when I least expected. But day to day, there's rituals like itadakimasu, there's rituals like, um, I mean, it's hard because they just happen. You just do them. They're muscle memory. But yeah, rituals are a big part, especially Nono Girl rituals were a big part. There was the way you commemorate death, and especially since I grew up Buddhist and I introduced that into the film, doing oshoko and bowing and how you put your hands and how you do the steps. Like I said, it's all muscle memory, but it is ritual, and there's a lot of that in Nono Girl, and especially in Japanese American culture.
Excellent, thank you. And Chris, how about for you? And how do family rituals play in your family?
Much more so, I think when I was growing up, I feel like I recall we did them more. There was more going on when I was growing up. You know, like Kenjinkai picnics and big gatherings at New Year's. And now they've just kind of gotten smaller. I think as the next generation's family sort of, you know, starts their own family. So we're just kind of splitting up a little bit. So it just, in my family, it seems to be a little bit less, you know, more recently, but certainly it's you know, familiar. And when I saw this in the script, it was something I knew and identified with immediately.
Well, thank you. And Mika, how about from your perspective and your experience?
I think some of the like everyday or the most prevalent everyday ritual I had growing up was like prayer before family meals. And it was just a way for us to kind of like collectively recenter, I guess, and just appreciate like the time that we had together. And I think some of the bigger ones that we still do and are like holidays and those kinds of gatherings, and like the foods that we eat on each holiday. Like my dad will deep fry a turkey for Thanksgiving. We have a whole range of food for Christmas. And then my mom recently has taken up the mantle of making the like New Year's foods, which she did by herself the past 2 years and was like, next year you're helping. So that'll be like a fun way, I guess, for us to pass down that tradition and not like forget, I guess, the culture that we come from.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for having so much food in your film, because I really got hungry while watching your film at different points. So really appreciate that.
I mean, I speaking of tradition, I mean, that's where it all comes from. And I want to include the food scenes because I really wanted to showcase the food that I love and the food that we eat. But I also wanted to showcase that the characters Sue and her mom Gail, how their relationship was anchored around the kitchen, like cooking and the food. Like they would make karaoke together, and you know, in my life, my sister and my mom make karaoke together, and I just really like that dynamic. I like seeing how their characters can bond while doing that. They can talk about things that are important to them while doing traditional food things. So yeah, I mean, food's a big part of that.
I also liked how you integrated alcohol into the film quite a bit.
You know, I think Asians drink a lot.
They do, and you really portrayed that, especially among the younger generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot, there's always, I think the Uncle Kenny character in particular, we all can point to and say, oh yeah, I know that uncle, he's gonna walk in with a 30 pack of Bud Light and
Right,
gonna be, that's gonna be Sunday football or something,
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, it's so cool because your family is on the call. I see them as attendees,
Oh,
and
really?
it's really quite cool. I remember when we talked to Evergreen that they were so supportive, and they think they brought food to the cast. There were some really important elements, and hopefully there was a benefit of that for this film as well. But
You don't even know the half of it. You should, in the credits, my mom is credited as catering because she and my aunt and Mika's aunt and Mika's dad and mom too, like they all came together to help put on the food for the entire shoot. Mostly my mom is a chef like in her own life, so she does catering sometimes, but yeah, my family was out there for catering and crafty, and we ate Japanese food and had musubi and just it's just a whole, it was amazing. We had like curry and chicken katsu and like it was great.
okay, we're getting hungry again. I think this is
I'm getting hungry.
I know what I'm having for dinner.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, Paul, yeah, so in both of your films, we talked about Evergreen for a little bit, and now No No Girl, your protagonists are on a personal journey. We're really interested in hearing more about that journey. Was it based on personal stories and personal experience, or your excellent storytelling? And also, can you remark, why is this story really important for you to give voice?
Well, I mean, that's tough. I think this story, I'm going to start with the last thing because I think it was important for me to tell this story. I felt like I had to make Evergreen to realize how to achieve a feature film storytelling. And, I kept it, there's two people in a car. And even though it's quite ambitious in the locations, it's relatively contained within these two characters, and other characters will come in. But I knew, okay, I know how to shoot this. I can shoot this. And to prove to myself that I can make it, that's what led me to make this film. Once I can make Evergreen and saw, okay, I can make this type of movie, I immediately wanted to get the family ensemble. I wanted to showcase how I grew up in my life in the Japanese American community. And as a Japanese American, a Yonsei, fourth generation myself, I wanted to show all that. I felt like I didn't want to mess it up. It was so important to me that I needed to I needed to prove to myself that I could do it without letting myself down or the story down. And even the script writing too, because I wrote, directed, and edited. I got better in all those crafts in the first feature film. Enough so where when it came to this story, this story that I've known my whole life, that things are burned and buried and destroyed in the wake of Pearl Harbor and the incarceration of our ancestors. It's something that every Japanese American person can point to and have a direct connection to in their life and in their family. So to finally be able to be confident enough to tell that story, that was really important to me. And the story itself comes directly from my life and from what I experienced in my community, in my family, in my closest friends. Just not only the dynamics between the characters, but like I said, the trauma and the things we're still working through from those terrible times in World War II when the greatest generation went through so much.
Yeah, I really felt there was a major sense of urgency to tell the story, and this happened all amidst your medical struggles too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how did that impact this journey?
It really, it changed everything in my approach to filmmaking at that time, because I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 25 in 2016. And during that time I shot Evergreen, and I'm like, okay, shot a movie while doing chemotherapy, like, nothing can be harder. And then my cancer relapsed in the height of the pandemic in end of 2020, and there's no vaccines available yet. And so I just went into pure survival mode and tried to get through it. It was really dangerous, and it was really painful, but I knew that I wanted to make another film. So I started writing in the hospital and did a bone marrow transplant. And yeah, during my recovery, that's when I reached out to Chris and just kind of approached him as a almost like a peer, even though I respected him so much. I just wanted to hear what his perspective on JA filmmaking, or filmmaking in general, but from a JA perspective. All of his films are so incredible. So I just reached out, trying to understand what can be done to break into the next level. And I mean, he's been the biggest hero on this project. He didn't just support me, he wanted to be on the project. I sent him the script, and you know, that was in like May or June, and by November we were shooting the movie. So I had a big year. Yeah.
Sure did. You know, I have to say, I'm a cancer survivor myself, and I went through chemotherapy, and I cannot believe that you actually wrote the script and worked on this film while undergoing chemotherapy. That is just so impressive and so admirable. And I can see how that would give you kind of a sense of urgency. You know, to get this done, because it does give you that sense of, you know, mortality as well. So,
well, when my cancer relapsed, we had just released Evergreen. So we did the Silicon Valley festival with you guys during that time. And then I got cancer again, maybe like a couple months after our discussion. And then I just threw Evergreen up. Well, like I got in with Amazon Prime, and we put it up, and we kind of abandoned the film festivals because, like I said, I was just so distracted. But
of course.
Yeah. But for me, the filmmaking, it's really just a part of, you know, I think I get a lot of that, like, how could you have done this? It wasn't like a struggle for me. It was hard. Like, I'm not going to get around that. It was extremely hard, but I had to do it. That was a part of me recovering, believing that there was a future. I wasn't telling everyone I'm going to live. I was not pessimistic, but a realist. I knew there was it was a very dangerous time in my life. But for me to write the script and push the pre-production, it was me kind of unconsciously admitting to myself, and maybe even people around me who could read through the lines, that I believed that I was going to live, and not only live, but we were going to make another movie in 6 months. You know, I couldn't walk when I got out of the hospital. I was writing the script, and my fiance is helping me across the street if we're trying to go outside for a little bit. And then 6 months later, we're on set and everyone's running around, and I'm able to walk by then and do everything. And I'm strong, but I'm scared and a little weak. But we were able to do it a month straight shooting with, you know, some breaks.
That's just so amazing. So much admiration. But in part, it may have helped give you a reason to keep pushing and to keep fighting. You know, that could be a great motivator, and probably was.
Yeah, I didn't know when I don't know when cancer is going to come back into my life. I feel like it's a race against some type of like cloud, but I'm done with cancer. There's none of that left.
No, I'm sure. So moving on from there, I'm really intrigued by the title of your film, No No Girl. And, you know, as we all know, there were the No No boys during World War II. And those were the people who answered no to 2 questions on the loyalty questionnaire that was given to them while they were interned. And in the film, there is some speculation that the grandma could possibly have been disloyal. They found the Japanese flag, and there was even a line asking, you know, was grandma a spy, possibly? So I was just wondering, with the film's title, were you kind of trying to possibly lead the audience to believe that the grandma could have been disloyal? And just elaborate further on the title. What was the genesis of it and the meaning of it?
That you answered a huge part of it, which was the no-no boys and the loyalty questionnaires and the no-nos in general. There's a lot of layers to why I wanted to title this movie No Girl. The deception not being the foremost, but that is there. I think the idea of just the past is always scarier and more illustrious than you can ever imagine. You know, the family doesn't know what to believe because new information is coming at them, and there's been so many secrets in their family and so many things buried and not talked about, you know, metaphorically and literally, that when these things are starting to come up, all the conspiracy, all of the reaching for answers in different places starts to come out, and they start to believe things that are impossible, that Bachan was a spy. Bachan was not a spy, but people start, you know, the flag comes out. And I think that's true in all of our lives, where if you have the trauma that Japanese American people have from this time, and things start to come up, you don't know what to believe because it's extraordinary. Anything could be true, theoretically. But to just go into why our film is titled No Girl, but besides the loyalty questionnaire and having to answer if they're loyal to the United States or if they're willing to fight for the United States as citizens who did nothing wrong, and they're only being approached based on racial prejudice. To answer no to those questions put you in a very bad place in the eyes of the American government. And from my perspective as a Yonsei, seeing these traumas and the things that happened back then are still affecting us today. And my character, Sue, played by Mika, that character is experiencing the same thing. Things happen in her family that are still affecting her to this day. And she has to live with that. And then to further go into it, I really wanted her to answer those same questions. Is she going to fight for her family? Is she loyal to her family? And throughout the movie, she has to answer those at many different times. And I think it's just a commentary on being how it is to stick up for yourself in the face of everything that's important to you, and finding your identity, not just within the family, but within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Fascinating. Great question, or great answer. Thank you.
and let's bring Chris into the conversation for a little bit. You know, Chris, we really admire all the work that you've done, not only in film and acting and directing and creating your own production company just to make some of those films. So congratulations on that. It's wonderful accomplishments. You know, I think during the film, what did you learn about yourself through playing this character, and about the intergenerational relationships that you had? You know, did you what did you learn about anything more about the trauma that Paul was just talking about, and the secrets that were passed from one generation to another? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I don't know that I learned something specific, other than it's an ongoing learning process, I think. As the next generation gets older and matures, as these issues kind of dwell in the family, as things come to light along the way that, oh, I didn't know that before, or somebody, you know, tells you this part of the story. We're just constantly learning, I think, about I think that experience of camp, because it had such a big impact, of course, on the Issei and the older Nisei. And then, as I was growing up, sort of as a Sansei, I'm Sansei, third generation, learning about that. And because I'm an artist, theater artist and filmmaker, I researched it and performed it and filmed it. And so, I really studied it kind of inside and out. And now to see the next generation, what their experience is, or how they're dealing with it, or what they've seen. So I'm just more. I mean, to me, it's a constant learning process, and so I was just kind of more aware of that, other than I think anything specific that I learned about myself, because there was a time when I'm sure there was a time when Nisei were wondering, what are the Sansei going to do, when they grow up. And then as I was around Sansei and they had Yonsei kids, we were wondering about what the future would mean in terms of our community and our history and our families. What have the Yonsei learned, or what have we taught them? And so to see now Yonsei fully express themselves in works of art, and I think it's to me it's a big step, because we didn't know that if that was going to happen, or if they would remember things or knew about things or would even care. So to me it's quite inspiring and validating and all those things to see the Yonsei carry the torch.
Yeah, and I'd just like to follow up on that question with you, Chris. Both of my parents and their families were interned in the incarceration camps as well. And I remember when I tried to, both of my parents are deceased now, but when I tried to ask my dad about the experience and the impact it had on his family, he was still so bitter about it that he really wouldn't share much information at all with me. And I got most of my information actually from my husband. He shared it for some reason with my husband, but not with me. So anyway, I was just wondering, did you have a similar experience with your parents? And did playing this role and being in this film make you kind of wonder if there was more hidden information or secrets that may have been in your family that were just never shared with you?
Yeah, I think there's always details, and there's always more you wish you knew. My family is a little bit different because both of my parents were very young. So their experience and their view of camp as 6 and 8 year olds going in is very different.
Yes.
So they talked freely about it to me, everything that they could remember. So I kind of grew up with that, and of course, as I said, have studied it a lot. But what you're talking about is very familiar, because I hear that quite often from Sansei. And that was something I think was important in this film, because I think that's Bob's experience, Uncle Bob.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the question of do we want to do anything about this, this newly discovered possible buried family heirlooms, and he completely rejects it. It's an emotional response. I mean, emotional responses, of course, are not always logical. In fact, they're usually the opposite of that. And I think, he doesn't want to be hurt by finding out it's not there, or finding out it's there, but we can't touch it, or, finding out that it's all disintegrated, or all kinds of fears, and I think he's being protective of the rest of his family also, because he doesn't want them to be hurt by it. So, it was very easy for me to know why Bob says, no, we're not going to touch it, not now. And then, when it is discovered, and when he is sitting there in the living room and he walks in and sees it, what that means to him. I think it's a huge moment for him, and it's very much a healing moment that I wish so many other Sansei could have,
Yes.
but of course, the Nisei have passed on, and so many of those stories are hidden. But it's a very interesting idea that's in this film, and for my character, of course, was the meaning of the whole film.
Mm. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Mika, I'd like to bring you into the fold here. You have so many great people to learn from and to hear the stories of. I'm wondering what you might have heard from your parents and your answers, and how did you prepare for this huge role that you did so well?
Thank you. um, wow. Growing up, my dad was very adamant about my brother and I learning of the Japanese American history in the camps. And we would often take like skiing trips to Mammoth. So on the way, natural stop was Manzanar. And for as long as I can remember, it was never really sugar coated. Like it was like, this is what happened. Um, Laid out very simply. As I've gotten older, the answers have gotten more complex. Just as I've like grown up and been able to process things a little deeper. Um, I didn't I didn't hear too much from like my grandparents because my on my mom's side, those her father and mother were both in Hawaii at the time. Um, so they were like just kind of martial law there. And then my dad's dad passed away before when my dad was very young, and then my mom's mother passed away, or sorry, my dad's mom passed away when I was like 5. So I didn't hear a lot of like firsthand accounts about the camps from them. Um, I think preparing for the role, a lot of the stuff is just uh, very similar to my life. With the story of Sue, there's um, a lot of details in the script that I'm like, whoa, like that was exactly how I grew up with like we said, the Uncle Kenny. I had one, his name's not that one's not Kenny, but I do have a very uncle that in my brain pops up like that. I think a combination of like my dad and some of my uncles filled in Uncle Bob's role. Not as like being silent about what happened in the camps, but just more stern and uh, that role of kind of protecting the family. Um, and the like older brother and cousin dynamic is something I'm very familiar with. My older brother and my cousin, who's 3 years older than him, like are best friends. And always really have been. I've always been a little bit disconnected from that relationship,
Mhm.
just because they're so close. So I think just a lot of the preparation for this role was kind of just combing through my own life. Um, there were some things where I like filled in the gaps of where Sue and I had a disconnect and where it was like, okay, these are the things I have to make up. But so much of it was just like, I am going to do my best to bring my whole life experience into this role, which I know is very rare, especially for a first role to have, where I was like, I'm not trying to distance this character really at all. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're wondering, what did in playing this complex role, what did you learn about yourself in playing about the role of a young woman who finds her voice, while developing the relationship with and seeing her mom?
Um, I think in playing Sue, there's a value of saying no, which is something I'm very bad at and have always been very bad at. But in like sticking up for what you believe in. Um, I think kind of because I portrayed this character, there have been parts like in my own life that are very personal, but that I've been able to kind of stick up for myself and be like, that's a boundary. This is what I believe in. I have to stick to this, no matter how painful it is, no matter how many people I lose on the way. And I think with the relationship of the mother, I've always had a very close relationship with my mom. And I think there was just like another layer of appreciation for how much she's been there for me, and how much she does for me that I don't even recognize. It's again something I've always known, but I think in seeing like Jill wrestle through that character development of Gail, and then like putting that onto my own mother and being like, oh, there's so much she does that I don't see, that I'm gonna have to appreciate, and there's so much strength in her that I'm like, that's what I want to take on, that were just kind of highlighted in this movie, I think.
Excellent. Thank you so much. It's always, it helps us reflect on our own. My relationship with my mom, or my relationships that I see intergenerationally with my daughter. It was wonderful to be able to go through that journey with you.
Yeah, I love when art, I don't know, one of the magic things about art, and specifically like film, that like we all see ourselves in different ways in every character. Yeah.
This was Mika's first film too, and she was on set every day, but I think one day, and she was on set doing lines. Like her character was present. Her character's in almost every scene in the movie. So I mean, Mika crushed it. She was amazing, so good.
Thank you, Paul.
It was surprising when you said it was her first film, because it was a fabulously done film, and you owned it.
Yeah, I had full faith in her after the callbacks and the auditions. It was like, I was really happy that I was so relieved when I saw her audition, because I knew, okay, we got it. But you know, I'm still gonna go do the other auditions, but it's like, it's there. It was amazing. Mhm.
That is news I wish I had so much sooner.
Yeah,
A lot of anxiety.
I can tell you that.
It would have saved you so much stress. Yeah.
Right.
I didn't even tell anybody that really until like later on in the process. You know, probably even I didn't even tell Mika that till, you know, way after we were done shooting. But
I found that out at a screening during a Q&A, just like this.
oh wow, yeah. From the get-go, I knew that okay, Mika's gonna do the role, but you just keep that quiet and you respectfully do the rest of the process. And then, you know, I was still like open-minded, like maybe someone will come through, but yeah, saw Mika's audition. It was like, all right, cool.
And that's so great when you get an actor that totally captures the character and what you're looking for. So
It was great too, because she was not like quite like the character that I had written. Like the character I had written was like more reserved. So I had her in just like normal, like shoulder length dark hair, and Mika comes into the audition with bright pink hair. And like as a personal choice, I'm like, I never imagined that for Sue, like the character. But yeah, like I said, Mika's audition was so like so perfect that I immediately knew that maybe, you know, I don't know this character as well as I should, and then this might just be the perfect choice for the character. Yeah.
Well, I for one loved the pink hair. I thought that added a lot to it.
Like on our poster and all of our marketing materials.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
so much more
Iconic.
colorful.
Yeah.
It spoke to the generation.
Definitely. Well, speaking of Mika, this question actually is for you, Paul. Kind of a prevailing theme throughout the film is how alone Sue is. She feels shut out and kind of excluded from her family. And then it's said, you know, several times that she really doesn't have a lot of friends. In fact, she's finding it very difficult to even find someone to live with. So I found it so interesting that after the 100th day gathering of the grandma's 100th day ceremony,
Mhm.
she was given a rice bowl with that was supposed to contain 2 grains of rice, but only had 1 grain. And to me, that was kind of symbolizing her isolation. And what I found so interesting too, at the very end during the New Year's dinner, there's a shot of Sue's rice bowl and it has 3 grains of rice. And to me, I interpreted that as she is now included. She is not alone anymore. And I was just wondering, was that your intent to show that by unleashing this information, by sharing these secrets, did that finally bring the character Sue the inclusion with her family that she was yearning for?
I love this. That was amazing. Way to go. That was so good. Of
Thank
course.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, her isolation is not just her isolation, it's the isolation of her whole family. It's the isolation of everyone that is left out of the circle who, everyone's just too scared to open up about the truth and about the pain that they're feeling.
Mhm.
And she's at a pretty low moment in the film when she receives the the rice bowl, which is a miso soup bowl, but I grew up eating rice out of my miso soup bowl because the chawan was too small. I needed more rice. But
Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was a miso soup bowl.
no, it's okay. That's a part, that's a part of the Japanese American, the reinterpretation of, true tradition. But
Yes.
um yeah, uh Mika or Sue's isolation and her this character had to dig for the truth. She had to literally dig in the ground for the truth. And unlike most Japanese American families, she brought the truth to her family. She pulled it out of the ground. Everything that they lost, she pulled it out and they opened it and they were able to experience that together and come together as a family. Whereas most families, I think the truer version of the story is that they never dig it up and it's just there forever. And there's probably a parking lot on top of it now or something like that. So I think the isolation, the coming together, the metaphor with the grains of rice, I think that's all tied in. I think you summed it up really perfectly though. I wanted that little moment to just be a warm stamp on the end of a film because the ending I feel is so powerful. I mean, if I'm can tangent for a second, the scene when they open the chest and the contents, their past is brought up before the whole family. When we were shooting that, I think Chris talks about this really well. But when we were shooting that, it was so emotional in the room. I've never experienced anything like that on a film set where, we've had dramatic moments in our other films and everything, but this was incredible. Like I said, my mom was on set doing the catering. Majority of the crew was AAPI, and on that day was, my good friend Kaylin Mahara, who also had ancestors in the camps, and my sister was on set, and it was like and then the whole cast was there, the whole family's there. When they opened the chest, I think we all knew in that moment how special it was, not to just be shooting this movie, but to just be living this moment briefly, even though it's fiction. It felt so personal, and I could hear behind the monitor, I was crying, but I could hear tears, and everyone was holding their breath, and I let the take go and I called cut, and there's nothing really to say. I just kind of said, okay, let's do it again. But it was I mean, I kind of want to hear Chris talk about it, but it was incredible. Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to hear your take on that, Chris.
Yeah, my view of movies that, every good movie, it's all building towards a moment in the film. And of course, because, as I already said, this was Bob's moment, at least for my character, I really wanted to build that up. And layer in all those things I was talking about and how much this meant to him and how much just seeing that sitting there in the room. I mean, he didn't have to see what was in it. It's just that it really was there. So, I wanted to make some kind of big choices. It doesn't really say in the screenplay, all these little details that ended up in the film, but as I said, it was a very, very easy for me to make it mean that much to Uncle Bob.
Mm-hmm.
And really what we have is an amazing ensemble, and we're all there in that room at that time, except for Ken Narasaki. But so, the family is all there, and that really brought it up to another level for me, because I can just look across the room and look at Jill, my on-screen sister, and we kind of share this moment as, brother and sister, everything that we knew growing up about, everything that we had heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just kept building. And, I just wanted to make a big choice, and wasn't sure how Paul would feel about it, because I didn't analyze it beforehand and tell him, so this is what I'm going to do because it means this, right? So then I'm going to do this. And we just did it in a take.
Mm.
And so, after he yells cut, I'm waiting to see if he's going to look at me and go, Chris, what are you doing? That's not a script. Or, if it was something he liked. And I could tell, that it was working, and we kept working on it. And, then it was just how Paul ended up cutting it together is really what finalizes it. But, there was so much going on. I mean, that I share a great moment with Mika. It was all unspoken. It was not spelled out or rehearsed. It was, very much, it was very real in the scene. So it was one of those rare chances, I think, as an actor, you get to do something that's layered that much, and with an ensemble like we had.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually staying in the film. It wasn't cut. Wow, that's great. I guess it was good.
What would I do without that scene, or just end the movie? No, we don't need to see.
You never know. You never know what's gonna, as an actor, you never
Right.
know what, how it's gonna get cut together. And it could often get trimmed down to something like, well, I had this really good moment, you cut it out, or something like that. But this movie is wonderfully edited. I think that's just kind of something unspoken about a film. When it's done really well, you don't even notice it. It just, you go, wow, this movie's really good. Well, a lot of that is because that's how it was cut. And so, that's another pat on the back of Paul, because he did all of that. And he just this making this whole film, he just made it look easy. So it was a big confidence booster first day on set, to see how he's running the set, and to see these people that he brought in, how they were working and how efficient they were, and how everything looked on the monitor. And it's like, this is going to be, this could be a great film.
Mm. Yeah, that was such a powerful moment, because in many ways, this family is particularly lucky that they were actually able to unbury these secrets and these treasures and these lost, possessions. And, speaking from personal experience, I'm one of those families who most of the information, most of the experience was left unsaid. And I still have so many questions, and it literally is buried. Both of my parents are deceased, so I have no way of getting that information anymore. And so there's really not a feeling of closure. And it's so in many respects, this family is so lucky, and it's such a powerful thing to have this information uncovered, and to understand your ancestors and your parents more, and what they did go through, and the impact of the internment on the family.
I think you really reached into, I think, and it's not just Asian, it's the immigrant dream
Mhm.
absolute dream to know what what it would be like to discover any kind of history and past. And it was like I got to I mean, it was so wonderful having to see it and to feel it. That was just such an emotional moment. I watched that over and over. Each time it's beautiful, but it's something I wish every immigrant could actually experience.
I think
But
that was why I felt it was really important that the thing that they discovered in the chest, sure there was the sword, and there's the joke about the Pearl Harbor and stuff. Like there's the evidence that the conspiracies and all the fears that we've been harboring, these even deeper realities, these darker secrets, and none of that was true. The thing that they discovered were the pictures and the things that the family buried in haste, and what we're left on are those photographs that Gail and Uncle Bob share with each other. I think that's the most important thing, because what they found was, themselves in a way.
Mhm.
And even deeper than that, are those photographs are completely authentic. That's my family. That's my bachan and my family's photos from that time. A lot of things in the chest itself, were all authentic things that were from that period of time, from those days in the camps.
Mm.
amazing.
Yeah, we weren't told what was in that chest when we shot it, so
What?
it
Really?
opening it up and all of us seeing it, the actors seeing it and going through it, I wasn't told.
Wow.
It
Wow,
was
so that was your general, that was a very real reaction then.
First couple times.
Personal.
First
Yeah.
couple should take.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we do have a question from the audience, and it's from Grace, and she's directing it to Chris, but I think it really applies to everyone in this panel. It's she asked, how do you see your work in No No Girl within the trajectory of your work and activism? What advice would you give younger Asian Americans, especially during this time of COVID and anti-Asian hate and
Mhm.
the
Yeah. Hi, Grace. Um, well, I mean, I feel like it fits, on among the films that I've made, and because it's obviously on a subject that I've been focusing on, trying to inform the public about, but as a completely new perspective. Again, the Yonsei perspective, and I told Paul when I read this script that I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. This movie, it's new. It's new for all of us. It's a very fresh view. It's not a Sansei story or a Nisei story. So for me, it's just sort of, I don't want to say completing, because I always want to keep going, but it's just taking another very sort of progressive step in sort of the canon of internment stories. What was the other part of that question?
Oh, and what would you what advice would you give
yeah,
younger?
It's such a great time to be a filmmaker, because everything is literally at your fingertips in terms of what you need to make a film. Everything that's in your iPhone, we had to find, rent, and borrow, and I mean, when we used to make films, it was ridiculous. It was the way they made films 100 years ago. So there's nothing to stop anyone now except your own imagination and your own desire to do something. So it's a great time to be a filmmaker in terms of that. But it all starts with the written word. So I would encourage everyone. You don't even have to be a filmmaker. Start writing. Start writing if you have an idea for a story, or write a short story, or in any format, because everything starts there. And again, talk to your family members. Ask questions. A lot of times we don't ask those questions. Talk to whoever's around and learn about who you are. It's also a great time because people are now interested in Asian American stories, and they weren't before. They meaning, say studios and networks and the people that sort of the gatekeepers of this industry. They're looking for that content now because finally they realized it actually makes money. And what it is completely original. We are a sort of virtually untapped section of American history and American life, because we've never seen ourselves up there. So everything we do now is sort of something brand new, people haven't seen before. So we have that advantage because originality sells. So, that's what I have to say toward, anyone interested in making films now is it's great. Now's the time to do it,
Great. And this question also goes to Mika and Paul. Do you see this film as a film of activism? Mika, you can go first.
Sure. I definitely think so. I think, kind of like I said earlier, with the idea of Sue being able to say no and pushing for what she believes in, despite even it going against her family, even if it's not directly. I mean, it is inherently political because it's trying to dig up the history of her family. I also think just the way that it's written, that Paul wrote it, it it doesn't feed into the stereotypes that we're used to seeing Asians fulfilling in media and entertainment. Sue is not a nerdy sidekick. No one in the film is really a nerdy sidekick. I would argue that Kento and Alan are a lot dumber than Asians are ever portrayed, and they're allowed to be funny, not because they're a punchline, but because they are making the jokes. There's also none of the characters are fetishized or sexualized in a way that a lot of Asian women are portrayed, and there's like the hint of a little bit of action, I guess, with the sword, but it's not like it's not a story about like martial artists and that kind of story that is also like one of the main ways that Asian stories are told in a lot of mainstream media, or the ones like most recognized. Like you assume that because they're Asian, they do kung fu or karate or something like that. But these characters are they're normal people, that and they have their age, like the struggles because they're Japanese American. But at the center of it, it's just a family, and it functions as a family that everyone recognizes.
Amen. Yes, that's so true. I mean, Asian American identity at its best, because these are real characters and people need to pay attention. This film presents each one magnificently as human beings, relatable people, and strong and intentionally there. Paul, can you comment on the film and its role in activism?
Yeah, I mean, I will always represent Japanese Americans and Asian Americans in all the films I make. So I'm just gonna try and continue doing what I think is my strongest voice, which is filmmaking and creating these stories and trying to grow our production as big and as wide as it possibly can. If I can get movies like this in front of people, like already we have had a week-long theatrical run. We've sold almost 2,000 tickets to in-person like venues and shows, and there are so many people that come up to me afterwards and say they had no idea that any of this was real or really happened, or they're asking me, is this real? Did this really happen? And I think those questions both into themselves are just a sign that people are being exposed to this really covered up, terrible, illegal thing that happened to us, you know, in 1942. I think as far as activism goes, I want to just keep sharing these stories and getting more people involved in learning about our history.
Hmm. And Paul, if I could ask one last question, because I know time has flown by, and so we'll need to wrap up soon. But I just loved one of the final lines in the film. And to quote the line, it said, "We were running from the fire, not hiding from the matches." Can you explain and elaborate on that line and your interpretation and the meaning behind it?
At that point in the film, there's been questions about their past. Are they a part of some underground Yakuza dangerous gangster club, or are they spies for the Japanese Empire? We don't want to talk about it. We want to talk about it. There's a lot of infighting in the family and a lot of people just being quiet and secrets being buried. And when they open the chest and they're all there and they're vulnerable with each other, Jill hands, or Gail hands Uncle Bob the thing that was really in the chest, the important thing that was in the chest, which was their family history, the photos, you know, they're the family that was there when it was buried and is no longer here because it was all taken away.
Mhm.
And the truth is that they were running from a fire. There was something coming to consume them. They couldn't stop it. They had to escape, but it did consume them. And they weren't hiding the matches, as in they weren't nefarious, or they didn't start the fire and it wasn't their fault. They were the victims. They were persecuted.
Yes.
So I think her to say that at the end there is the second time she has this connection with Mika's character, where she admits that she's just really, really sad about
Mhm.
her mom's passing and what she doesn't know, what she was never able to communicate with her mom. She opens up to Sue about this part of her life that she regrets. And at the end there, with Uncle Bob, the patriarch of the family and the oldest brother her whole life, she tells him that this is what is really important.
Mhm.
I think that line in the moment comes together really well.
Oh, it does. Beautiful. Just beautiful ending. Thank you so much.
I was really happy with it. And then, I mean,
Beautiful.
Mika and Chris and Jill in the same room, and Scott Takeda and Kurt Kanazawa, and you know, it's just how can it go wrong?
Yes,
And
exactly.
everyone in there was amazing. And we talked about it, how everyone's crying on set. Never had a moment like that ever.
Mm,
Wow.
so
Well,
beautiful.
you've done it again. It was a fabulous film. No Girl, everyone really needs to see this film. Just everyone needs to see this film for so many reasons. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful story, beautiful characters, an awesome debut of Miko Joe. And I just want to thank Paul, Miko, and Chris. You have done a fabulous job, and I know you represent the whole film in its entirety. Folks, please watch this film. It is playing on Silicon Valley Asian Pacific Film Festival online from October 28th through November 6th. Vicki, would you like to close this program?
Oh my gosh. A real treat to see a presentation of a family that is dynamic, authentic, honest in their character. And I am like you, Leanne. Everyone needs to see this film. It's a voice that has been missing for a long time, and to give voice to these 120,000 stories plus is going to begin to help heal the intergenerational trauma that incurred because of this horrific treatment of Japanese Americans and their alien Japanese parents and grandparents. So thank you so much. It's a beginning. It really is a beginning.
Yeah.
And thank you, Chris, for pointing that out, that the torch has been passed. And thank you, Paul, for picking up that torch, and Mika for joining the ensemble. What a wonderful, wonderful film for all of the reasons you've talked about tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I echo everyone's sentiments.
Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. See you
Thank
soon.
you, everyone.
Bye.